Miriam lay awake, the soft tick of the bedside clock louder than usual. Her husband Walter was beside her, breathing, snoring faintly, but the space between their bodies felt like a canyon. They hadn't touched in months, not out of anger, not even out of indifference, just habit, routine, a quiet forgetting. She turned on her side, closed her eyes, and whispered a question into the dark. Is this it now? It wasn't always this way. In their 40s and 50s, even with kids and bills and long days, they had found time, stolen moments in the kitchen, slow mornings on Sundays. But after 65, the spark faded. Not because love died, but because no one told them that intimacy wasn't just a luxury, it was survival. Walter's blood pressure had been climbing. His energy dropped. His memory, once sharp, grew clouded. Doctors said it was aging. Normal, expected. But one day their physician, a quiet woman with silver hair and steady eyes, looked Walter straight into the face and asked, "Are you still having sex with your wife?" Walter flushed. "At my age?" Her response was swift. That's exactly the problem. What she explained next would change their lives. Because what Miriam and Walter didn't know, what most seniors never hear, is this. Sex is not just a pleasure. It's a biological reset. And without it, the body begins to close in on itself. We call it the vital spark decline, a gradual deterioration in hormonal balance, immune strength, cognitive clarity, and emotional regulation that accelerates when sexual activity vanishes from later life. The body is a sensory machine. It thrives on connection, on touch, on pleasure. When those inputs stop, the systems that depend on them begin to shrink. Testosterone drops in men and women alike. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, disappears. Dopamine levels sink. Cortisol, the stress hormone, creeps higher. And what follows? Higher risk of stroke, increased depression, insomnia, muscle atrophy, brain fog, even premature mortality. Studies from the British Medical Journal and Harvard Health have confirmed it. Seniors who maintain a healthy sex life live longer, happier, and more resilient lives. Miriam sat across from the doctor, stunned. "But we're not 20 anymore," she said. The doctor nodded. "Exactly. You need this more, not less. Because intimacy in old age isn't about performance. It's about presence. Not about lust, but longevity." And that night, as Walter reached for Miriam's hand under the blanket for the first time in months, she squeezed it gently and something ancient stirred between them. Not just attraction, but hope. The body remembers. It forgives. It reawakens slowly like the first sun after a long winter. So before you write it off, before you say, "Not at my age," ask yourself this. What if the silence in your bedroom is echoing through your body in ways you never imagined? And what if breaking that silence could bring you back to life? Miriam stood at the bathroom sink, brushing her hair slowly. Each stroke felt like waking up a forgotten part of herself, not for anyone else, not to be seen, just to feel. She hadn't realized how much of her identity had withered since the last time she had been truly intimate. She had assumed it was normal, just what happened with age, but now she knew better. Because what her doctor said stayed with her. When intimacy stops, the body loses one of its most ancient forms of medicine. That day she had gone home and searched for the data, not gossip, not myths, real science. She found it, published studies in peer-reviewed journals, data spanning decades. Regular sexual activity in later life was linked to better memory performance, fewer heart attacks, lower inflammation markers, improved sleep cycles, and even increased lifespan. It wasn't a stretch. The skin is the largest organ in the body. It needs touch. The brain, a pattern machine, depends on novelty, stimulation, emotional highs. Without them, it dulls. This wasn't about youth, it was about function. Walter had already begun to notice subtle changes. His morning fog lifted quicker. His joints felt less stiff. He laughed more. Small things, yes, but undeniable. And that's what we call the sensual renewal loop, a cycle of gentle, mutual intimacy that triggers hormone release, strengthens circulation, and reignites neurological vitality. It's not about acrobatics or performance. It's about permission to feel, to enjoy, to be touched and known. Most seniors think sex must vanish once stamina fades, once desire isn't urgent, once the body changes. But that belief is not biology, it's culture. It's shame disguised as wisdom. Walter and Miriam had bought into it for years, but now they were undoing that damage with quiet courage. They didn't jump back into things like teenagers. No, they started slow, eye contact, holding hands, rubbing each other's backs before bed, a soft hand resting on a thigh while watching TV, and something remarkable began to happen. They slept more soundly. They fought less. Meals tasted better. And most surprising, pain diminished. Touch releases oxytocin. Oxytocin reduced cortisol. Reduced cortisol lessens inflammation. Less inflammation means fewer aches, fewer headaches, fewer waking hours wrapped in discomfort. This wasn't just intimacy, it was therapy. But society had taught them to keep it behind closed doors, to pretend they didn't need it anymore, that somehow desire at their age was undignified. But the truth? There is nothing more dignified than returning to your own body with kindness. Miriam looked at herself in the mirror that morning and didn't see age. She saw a woman who had raised children, carried grief, survived cancer, and still had warmth left in her hands. And now she would no longer apologize for needing to be touched, because her skin still responded. Her heart still ached for closeness, and her body, it was not done whispering. Walter hadn't expected the changes to be so profound. It started small, an extra half hour of sleep, a little more patience with the neighbors, the return of morning energy he hadn't felt in years. He found himself humming old songs as he trimmed the rose bushes. But inside, the real shift was deeper. He no longer felt invisible. For the longest time, Walter believed that sex after 65 was optional, a luxury, something to joke about with friends, but not seriously expect anymore. But what he now understood was that the human body never stops needing intimacy, only the world stops giving permission. He had once told his grandson, "Touch is how we know we're real." He didn't know at the time how much he needed to hear those words himself. And now every quiet embrace with Miriam felt like a secret conversation between their hearts, one that required no words. That's what we call the intimacy preservation reflex. It's the body's subtle ability to recover vitality when regularly met with affection, eye contact, and non-performative physical closeness. Even the simple act of cuddling lowers heart rate variability and boosts parasympathetic nervous system recovery. This is not opinion, it's physiology. Walter's doctor had shared a study from Sweden where researchers tracked seniors' health and intimacy patterns over a 12-year period. The results were startling. Those who engaged in regular intimate acts, not necessarily intercourse but shared touch, had 30% fewer hospitalizations, better mental health, and a significantly lower risk of heart disease. Because the body doesn't forget how to respond. It simply waits for the invitation. Miriam noticed changes too. Her once frequent headaches diminished. Her hands, once cold in the mornings, now stayed warm. Even her digestion improved. Touch, it turns out, stimulates the vagus nerve, which supports not just mood, but the digestion, immunity, and sleep. And this was without any new medication. No pills, no supplements, just presence. They had created a ritual together. Once a week, no pressure, no agenda, just undressing slowly. Not to arouse, but to acknowledge that their skin still had stories to tell. They lit a candle, played the record they used to slow dance to, and let their hands relearn each other. It wasn't performance, it was reverence. And in those moments, something extraordinary happened. Grief melted. Years of silence dissolved. Fear of aging softened into wonder. Miriam wept once, not from sadness, but from feeling her heart say, "I'm still here." Because that's the tragedy of our culture. We teach seniors to fade, but in truth, the fire is never gone. It just waits under the ashes for someone to breathe again. So the question isn't whether you're still capable of having sex. The question is, are you still willing to feel alive? Because what dies first in most people isn't the body. It's the permission to be touched. Walter had a dream one night, a soft, quiet dream that felt more like memory. He was back in the old house where they raised the children. Miriam's laughter echoing from the kitchen, her silhouette glowing in the morning light. He woke up with tears on his cheeks. But these weren't tears of grief. They were tears of return. Because somehow, through the rekindling of touch, of closeness, of shared breath and unhurried evenings, he had begun to remember not just her, but himself. The version of him that used to smile more, worry less, and wake up with purpose. And that's why we call this healing the sensory restoration threshold. It's the point at which sustained intimacy, even once a week, leads to a measurable recovery in emotional resilience, hormonal stability, and immune response. A tipping point, where being touched and seen again causes not only psychological uplift, but actual biological repair. You see, Walter's blood pressure readings were coming down. His resting heart rate slowed to that of a man 10 years younger. Miriam's mood swings leveled out. Her skin tone brightened. Even her joint pain, once gnawing, grew gentler. Not because of any miracle drug, because of touch. Warm, slow, consistent touch. Too many seniors assume the absence of desire means the end of intimacy. But in truth, desire doesn't vanish. It matures. It becomes more about connection than climax, more about feeling held than feeling hot. And for Walter and Miriam, that shift was not a loss. It was liberation. They began holding each other after breakfast. Just 5 minutes. No phones, no agenda, just breath against shoulder. Fingers tracing age lines like sacred poetry. And in those quiet acts, they were rebuilding something that no therapist, no medication, no doctor could give them. Safety. Safety in each other. Safety in their bodies. Safety in being alive. One morning, Walter looked in the mirror and whispered, "You're doing better than I thought." He hadn't said anything kind to himself in years. That alone was medicine. We forget that sexual wellness is not about performance, youth, or stamina. It's about staying awake, keeping the senses alive, remaining open to joy. And the absence of that joy over time is deadly. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but like a slow dimming of the lights in a once vibrant room. Walter and Miriam were turning the lights back on. And it wasn't just about sex. It was about reclaiming the fundamental truth no one told them in their 60s or 70s. If you stop touching your life starts fading. Not just emotionally, but physiologically. Your immune system notices, your hormones shift, your breath changes, your smile disappears. And one day, you wake up wondering where you went. But it doesn't have to be that way. There's still time, there's still skin, there's still a heart under your ribs waiting to be noticed again. And maybe, just maybe, you don't need to wait for anyone else. Miriam once feared that growing old meant disappearing. Not dying exactly, but dissolving. Being looked at without being seen. Touched only in routine. Kissed only on the forehead like an obligation. Her body, once alive with music and hunger, had become quiet. Dismissed. But now something extraordinary had returned to her, not through noise, but through stillness, because Walter had started noticing her again. The curve of her shoulders, the breath in her chest, the way her voice softened in the evenings when she read. And it wasn't about desire as it once was. It was about presence, reverence, and in that reverence, she felt herself reappear. We underestimate the quiet devastation of disconnection, the slow, invisible decay that happens when a person is no longer seen as touchable, desirable, vital. But here's the most powerful truth of all. Touch brings us back. Back to our breath, back to our body, back to the sacred ground of being alive. And what Walter and Miriam had found wasn't just intimacy, it was immunity against despair, against depression, against the dangerous lie that they were finished, because they weren't. They had become witnesses to a forgotten truth, that aging doesn't require withdrawing from pleasure. It requires leaning into it, gently, consistently, and without apology. They gave it a name one night as they lay side by side in silence. The reclamation hour. A time just once a week when they closed the door, dimmed the lights, and chose each other again. Not in loud, dramatic ways, but in skin, in warmth, in breath. And in doing so, they didn't just remember their love. They remembered themselves. Walter's eyes had grown softer, Miriam's posture more relaxed. There was laughter in their kitchen again. Music on Sunday mornings, long conversations after dinner where neither of them reached for the remote. They were healing from years of invisibility, from the myth that older adults must become untouchable, from the belief that sex is just about youth, because it never was. It was always about awakening. And now in their late 70s, they had found a kind of aliveness most people never reach, even in their prime. You might not need intercourse. You might not even need climax, but you do need closeness. You do need attention. You do need to feel the electricity of being someone who still matters. So if you're listening now and you've grown quiet in your own body, if the mirror has become a place of judgment instead of reverence, if the bed feels colder, not from the weather, but from forgetting, then hear this. You are not too old to be touched. You are not too far gone to feel seen. And you are not done. There is warmth in you still. Let it be touched. Let it be kind. Let it come back to life.